It has been 26 years since the G20 was formed, and President Ramaphosa is hosting the 19th Leaders Summit and the first ever to be held in Africa. So the events of the next few days here in Johannesburg will go down in history, given the pivotal role the G20 plays in trying to forge international economic cooperation. Because this summit is taking place at an unprecedented moment, with the world's largest economy, the United States, led by President Donald Trump, waging a global trade war of precisely the kind the G20 has tried to head off for nearly 3 decades. If we go all the way back to 1999, the G20 was formed as a direct consequence of the Asian financial crash and the need to try and prevent the market disruptions globally that crash sparked. So the G20 was initially seen as a place where finance ministers and central bank governors from 19 countries, plus the European Union, could meet to try and improve economic cooperation between them. And the fact that South Africa, Brazil, India and China were included in the grouping was a signal right from the start that strategic conversations could no longer only continue to occur among the G7 nations, the leading industrialized economies of the world. By 2008, almost a decade after its founding, there was a new global financial crisis, and the G20 responded with its first ever Leaders Summit. It took place in Washington, D.C., was hosted by President George W. Bush, and heads of government pledged to upgrade the grouping. They wanted it to become the world's main forum for economic crisis management, and they vowed to avoid any kind of protectionist fever from spreading. By the time world leaders met in Toronto in 2010, the international economy was looking brighter, and the G20 decided to focus on reforming the world's financial institutions, including the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund. They agreed the G20 should not always just be in firefighting crisis mode, but instead should start answering longer-term questions about debt, development, and climate change. Fast forward to 2015, and the G20 leaders met in the Turkish province of Antalya. By then, the group's agenda was coalescing around 3 main themes: inclusiveness, implementation, and investment. But the summit occurred just days after a series of coordinated terrorist attacks on Paris. They took 130 lives and resulted in a violent siege of the Bataclan theatre in the French capital. So security concerns about Islamic fundamentalist terrorist groups rapidly rose to the top of that G20 summit's agenda. In 2019, world leaders descended on Osaka in Japan, little knowing it would be the last G20 summit before the COVID-19 pandemic. By now, Donald Trump was at the helm during his first term in office, and with core themes of global economy, trade and investment, Osaka was also the first G20 summit to be dominated by discussion of trading tensions between the United States and China, a harbinger in many ways of conversations that will continue this weekend right here in Johannesburg. After several virtual summits caused by COVID lockdowns, world leaders were back meeting in person in 2022, this time in Bali in Indonesia. The focus, of course, the complicated post-pandemic path to economic recovery. Recover together, recover stronger was the summit's inevitable theme. Last year, G20 leaders gathered at the Museum of Modern Art in Rio de Janeiro. And for the first time, the African Union was welcomed to play a full role around the table. The summit's aim, building a just world and a sustainable planet, was a clear indication of President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva's main priorities that in many ways echo those of President Ramaphosa. There was, as ever, lots of talk about the need for reform at the world's financial institutions. And for the first time, the G20 Social was launched, bringing civil society formally in to the discussions and debates. And so we come to Johannesburg 2025, President Ramaphosa's opportunity to welcome world leaders to South Africa. The conversations will focus on solidarity, equality and sustainability, three topics that are of critical importance to the vast majority of G20 members. But of course, in many ways, they are topics rejected by the United States, now not even sending Vice President J.D. Vance here in place of President Trump. 26 years after the G20 was formed, the Leaders' Summit remains one of the key moments on the annual global calendar. But while the institution has served as a vital colloquium for discussion about the world's most pressing issues, tensions that exist on the world stage are still able to dilute and sometimes even neuter the impact of any single summit. So there are big stakes in the days ahead, but also big questions about just how much this G20 Leaders' Summit can achieve.